7 True Campfire Horror Stories. Story 1. The Night on Oxford-Milford Road. They said the road was haunted, but when you are young, you think haunted means good story. Sam and Mara were 20 and stubborn. They drove into Oxford at dusk just to see the place people whispered about. The sky was a washed-out blue. On the radio, a song from 5 years ago looped like a memory that wouldn't die. Oxford-Milford Road looked normal in daylight, a narrow 2-lane ribbon between fields and the kinds of trees that smell like rain. But at night it changed. People said headlights would show faces in the middle of the road, or you'd see a car stopped with a woman at the wheel, only to find the car empty when you got close. Sam parked in a turnout. They laughed about it, dared each other, walked under trees whose leaves made slow, soft claps in the wind. The only noise that felt real was the scrape of gravel under their shoes. A half-mile down, the road bent around a stand of old maples. The turn held a bus stop bench and a telephone pole stuffed with yellowing flyers. Mara shivered, put her hands in her pockets. "Okay, one look, then we go back," she said. They stood on the shoulder and watched the black ribbon of road slip into a deeper black. Somewhere far off, a farm dog barked once. The moon was a thin coin. Suddenly, a pair of headlights came toward them, bright and steady. Sam waved. The car slowed, then stopped in front of them, and the driver's window rolled down. Inside was an old man, sunken into the driver's seat like he had been a long time. His face was pale and folded, his eyes 2 small stones. He looked at them with a tired, polite sort of patience. "You folks need a ride?" he asked, voice traveling like a leaf falling. Sam sniffed. "We're just looking around." He felt foolish, like a boy pretending to be brave. Mara laughed a little too loudly. The old man smiled, and in that smile the lines around his mouth were full of stories. "You shouldn't stand out here. Too late and the road gets hungry." He tapped the dashboard with a trembling finger. The radio inside the car clicked on, and a country song spilled out, one Sam's dad used to sing. Mara frowned. "That's my mom's song," she said, very quiet. The old man's smile didn't change. "This road remembers what it wants to remember." He nodded as if offering advice. "Drive slow. If someone flags you down, don't stop." The car rolled forward. As it passed, the air smelled like the backseat of an old vehicle. Dust, old leather, a hint of something else. Lavender and mildew. When the headlights moved past them, a second car's beams cut across the trees behind it. Sam and Mara turned. There, sitting on the bench at the bus stop, was a girl. She had on a raincoat even though no rain fell. Her hair was wet, or it looked like wetness in the moonlight. She held a paper cup between her hands. She looked at them with that slow, careful stare that makes your breath stop in your throat. "Do you need a ride?" she asked, the words flat like someone reading them from a page. Mara took a step. "Are you okay?" The girl's eyes narrowed. "I was supposed to be picked up," she said. "He never came." She looked away and then back, and her face was thin as paper. "If you leave me here, I'll—" Her voice cracked, turned into a noise like a small animal caught under a door. A car drove by, right then, with elbows of light that showed the girl's face fully. Her skin pulled taut over cheekbones that might have been too sharp if they were not so very pale. The driver of that car honked, a short, bored sound, and kept going. The girl stared after it, then dropped the paper cup. It hit the gravel and burst into white paper confetti that flew like snow. Mara grabbed Sam's arm. "We have to go." Sam's foot wobbled on the gravel, and he remembered the old man's warning about drivers flagging you. He looked back at the bus stop. The girl stood and walked toward the woods, small steps, head down. She didn't look careful or fearful, only determined, like someone following an instruction from a voice only she could hear. They got back in the car. Doors thudded shut. Sam started the engine. The headlights lit the white paper on the road and then the bench where the girl had been. The bench was empty. There had been footprints in the soft shoulder, but the gravel showed only a single wet patch where paper had been crushed. As they drove away, the radio flicked between stations. At one crossover, the voice of a DJ mentioned a crash last year. The kind of crash that leaves a permanent hollow in a town. Sam heard the town name and swallowed. Mara's hands were gone numb on the steering wheel. They pulled into the first all-night diner to get coffee, but Mara could not stop looking at the road behind them. The waitress made coffee, set it down with hands that trembled like someone who always felt the cold. "You folks out for the Milford Road?" she asked. The bagel she set before Sam slid like a boat. Mara nodded. "Is it true? About the ghosts?" The waitress put down a paper napkin and pressed it flat with her palm. "There's a stretch where people see things," she said. "An old man who gives advice and a girl waiting at the bench. Folks say the girl keeps getting left. They say she calls out and nobody answers. Sometimes you can hear her voice on the radio at night." Sam watched the waitress's face and noticed tiny scars along her knuckles. "Did something happen here?" he asked. She sighed. "A bus used to run this road. One night years back, a drunk driver crossed the yellow line. 2 people died. There was a girl on the bench waiting for a ride. They say her mother came later and found the bus gone and the bench empty. Some of us say the bench remembers the way she waited. They left the diner in the blue of early morning and tried to explain it as sleep, as nerves. But that night and other nights, on different roads and near different benches, people in Oxford told the same story in different words. The old man at the wheel, the girl with the paper cup, the bench that remembers." Years later, Sam and Mara did not remember all the words of that night, but they remembered the sound of the radio switching songs, the way the girl's paper cup burst into white, and the small, pressing knowledge that the road would ask for what it had been given. When Sam told the story years later around a fire, with friends leaning in and the flames making faces on their skin, Mara said nothing. She stared at the dark line of trees and listened for a country song that might swell out of the wood and call her name. The listeners laughed when it seemed to demand a punchline. But for Sam, the night on Milford Road had become a shape that did not fit the rest of his life. It fit only the part meant to be left out. Story 2. The Caver's Last Entry. We told ourselves we were explorers. That is how bad things start, by naming them noble. The 6 of us, me, Pete, Aaron, Lena, Jorge, and Beck. We were a college crew and we liked maps. We liked places without names. In late summer, we found a sinkhole by the river that nothing in the county maps had. A farmer shrugged and claimed he'd avoided it his whole life. That was enough. The cave's mouth was small and framed by an arch of rock and root. The air that rose from it smelled like water and ancient things. At first, the light of our headlamps showed only compacted earth, then slick brown rock. The first chamber was small and we laughed. The type of laughter that sounds like wind in a dented tin can. As we went deeper, the walls got stranger. The rock had veins that looked like faded script. Stalactites hung like the teeth of some sleeping thing. At every turn, our radios sang each other's names back in static. On the 3rd night, we found a passage that sloped down at a weird angle. The ground gave and the sound of water was louder, like a person running across the ceiling. Jorge left his pack and slipped into the slope like something that had been waiting for him. He waved us through with a grin. "This is it," he said, meaning more than the passage. We kept notes on scraps of paper and carved small arrows into the walls. We believed that mapping would protect us, that names tame fear. Maps did not speak back. The deeper we went, the more the passages repeated themselves. We had walked in circles before, but this felt different. A single faint smell, burnt bread or rope, came and went. Once it stuck to our noses for a long minute. We started to find things in the corners. A child's shoe with frayed laces, a hair ribbon dry with dust, a coin with a face none of us recognized. None of us said where they might have come from. 2 nights in, Beck began to change. He would sit and listen to the walls in a way that made the rest of us watch him. Once he whispered, "They're under the floor." then pulled his gloves on too tight and coughed. We teased him, but the jokes grew thin. His entries in the log were small and uneven. On the 5th night, we reached a chamber that smelled like old paper. The walls were covered in scratch marks, hundreds of them, small, deliberate, like an animal pawing for light. Near the center of the floor lay a slab of rock we could not move, though our hands ached and our shoulders burned from trying. The slab had a groove worn into it, as if something had been dragged there many times. Aaron, always the practical one, knelt and knocked on the slab. The sound was wrong, too hollow, and a low vibration moved through the soles of our boots. For half a breath, the cave felt like it had remembered everyone who'd ever crouched inside it and was waiting politely for another name. When we tried to lift the slab, the cave answered. A smell, metal and something sweet, rose up, and then the air filled with a whisper, not words but pressure. Aaron's face went white. He backed away and stammered, "Let's go, now." We went, but Jorge stopped to scrape something on a wall. He shouted over his shoulder, "Look, letters!" He held up his light and we could see the gouges spelled out a name, then another word that repeated, over and over, "Return." The gouges looked like they'd been made by someone who had very little strength and a lot of time. At the mouth of the cave, we found our map turned into a knot of lines. The slope we had used to go down looked steeper by daylight. The sun did not touch old things. That night outside the cave, things happened that I cannot explain without any paling of the truth. Beck woke screaming and pointed into the dark where no one stood. Jorge, who had been all bravado, whispered that he saw footprints pop into the mud and then vanish. Aaron swore that someone had leaned on his shoulder in the dark and he felt the cold of a stone thumb. We kept going back. Pride and curiosity had teeth. We made more notes. We left a camera down low in a passage and checked it 2 days later. The footage showed pause, then a blink, then a smear across the lens like someone's breath. On day 9, the camera was gone. We found the tripod snapped in two like twigs. On the 12th day, we planned to stop. The caves had a way of telling you their limits. Beck had stopped sleeping. He would stare at the map and trace a path with the tip of his finger, as if the cave were a mouth he could soothe by pressing the pen into it. At dusk, we descended one last time. The slab was waiting. This time when we tried to pry it, the cave did not allow casual failure. The ground beneath us shuddered as if something under the rock decided to breathe. A sound came up, a scrape and a low grinding like bone against stone. Under the slab, when it moved enough for a crack of light, were small things. A child's drawing of a house, a dried leaf pressed flat, a small dull bell. The bell had a thread tied to its clapper. We held the bell in the light and it hummed with a tone that matched something old in our heads. Jorge tied the bell to his neck like a joke. We should have left then, all of us, without a map, without the bell. Pride is a slow animal. We went back deeper still. It was after midnight when the cave finally answered us in a single voice. One of us went quiet, and the sound of his silence stretched until it was a crack you could put your finger into. The bells from the pocket of a jacket rolled across the floor as if someone up above had shook their keys. Then Beck was gone. One moment he stood with his light pointing at a seam in the rock, making the seam glow like a vein. The next his light winked and a sound like a thumb drawn across a violin string filled the space behind our ears. We called his name. We called it until the voices on the radios became only noise. We ran. The cave took our breaths and gave them back in coughs. We found Beck's shoe on a slope, empty except for a scuff of dirt shaped like a foot. We found his light further on, its battery dead, its lens spidered with a web of hairline cracks. We found one of his gloves hooked on a stalagmite like a small white flower. We left the cave messy. We left our markings, our feelings, our arrogance. We never found Beck. The university asked us to stop going. Parents worried and wanted to know why the boys had gone in with so little caution. Some people said Beck had fallen and they used the word accident. They did not know the way a place can take one of you and leave the rest of you with a gap shaped like a missing tooth. Years later, I read old posts online of other groups who had dropped things down the same sinkhole. They told the same stories: a bell, a shoe, a light that stopped and then moved on its own. Some wrote that caves keep a ledger. Others said a cave simply keeps what can't be named. I still keep a log. I still trace the map sometimes with a finger. Once in a while, in the back rooms of my sleep, I hear the bell Jorge tied around his neck. It rings just once, soft as a closed book. Story 3, The Licked Hand Along. Classic campfire urban tale with a twist, you know the one. Girl alone in a house, big dog under her bed. Something creeps in. The dog licks her hand in the dark to let her know it's there. But this version is older, slower, and it waits for your throat to tighten. Maggie lived alone in a clapboard house at the end of a lane. Her dog, Old Blue, was the color of Riverstone and the kind of dog that earned his name. People said the farm that once stood on that land had secrets, but Maggie shrugged. Secrets always belong to the past until you open a window and let them smell the present. The summer, the heat refused to leave. Maggie started hearing noises. Soft trips on creaky boards that were not the cat, not the house settling, but steps. They came at night. She never saw anyone. Sometimes the light in the street would swing and seem to make a stage on her kitchen table. Once she swore she saw a shadow move across the blinds like someone pretending to pass. Then one night her sister called and said, "You should be careful. There have been break-ins nearby." Maggie tightened her curtains and checked the locks anyway. Old Blue slept at the foot of her bed, snoring like an old truck. At 2 a.m. the house grew very quiet. Maggie lay awake, the sleep at the edges of her like a cotton film. From the foot of her bed, Old Blue made a small sound and then licked her hand. She reached down without opening her eyes and felt his cold tongue on the skin between her knuckles. The comfort was a small, bright thing. She smiled and fell asleep. In the morning, she woke with a memory that tasted like copper. The front door was still bolted. Old Blue lay in his place, but his eyes were wet with something that might have been sorrow. Maggie kissed his head and went about her day. The next night it happened again. Old Blue licked her hand at the same hour. Only later that night she thought of the news from town and the smell of someone else in the house. She checked the windows and found a small smear on the stair rail, like someone had dragged a palm and not meant to be noticed. On the third night the licking came earlier. Old Blue licked her hand, then he made a low sound in the back of his throat and stopped. Maggie thought she heard the front door move just the slimmest amount, like a person very careful. Her heart hammered. She forced herself to whisper, "Blue?" He lifted his head, ears alert, and his pupils were like worn coins. He whimpered and then licked her again, urgent this time. She felt the old comfort surge like a shield. She pulled the covers over her head and waited. The house was full of small sounds. The refrigerator humming out in the kitchen, the distant call of a train. And then there was a sound like someone walking on the roof, but down nearer to the floor. It moved slowly from room to room. Once, near the bathroom, a faint click as if a pocket knife opened and shut. Maggie's breath shrank. She lay there trying to decide what to do. The dog licked her hand and seemed to say with his small dog patience, "I'm here." Maggie took his paw in her other hand and prayed she would not be betrayed by brave thoughts. The steps stopped outside her door. For a long minute, nothing happened. Then the bed moved as if something touched it gently, the way wind makes a curtain bow. Maggie waited until the sound of someone walking downstairs faded into the night. The next morning, she told herself she would do something, call a neighbor, buy a bolt stronger than the one she had. Instead, she sat at her kitchen table and made coffee and watched the road, which was empty. On the fourth night, Old Blue licked her hand at 2 a.m. Then he did not lick again. Instead, he whined and stood, a low thing rising from his throat. He walked toward the foot of the bed and put his muzzle against the floor, sniffing. The hair along his spine rose like a tiny comb. He pressed his forehead against a place under the bed and shivered. Maggie knelt and looked under the bed. Something moved fast and dark, and then it was a face. A human face, pale and wet, pressed to the floorboards. The nose was long and thin. The eyes were bright with hunger. Old Blue barked once and leapt. He tore at the thing with a savageness Maggie had never seen. Fingers closed like clamps around Old Blue. He yelped. He fought. The room was a tangle of animal sound and the sickening snap of something tearing. Maggie screamed and grabbed the leg of the thing and felt something cold and unnatural slip through her fingers. When the streetlights came on and the neighbor called out, the thing was gone. The floor by the bed held only a smear of something dark. Old Blue lay very still with his head at Maggie's feet, eyes closed, chest not moving right. She cradled his head and felt the warmth leave him in a slow, heavy tide. The police took notes and said they'd increase patrols. They said people sometimes break in. They said dogs sometimes get hurt. They said the thing under the bed was probably an intruder. But they did not find prints. They did not find evidence of a third presence. The small smear on the floor could have been many things. Maggie buried Old Blue under the willow in her yard. She dug with hands that shook and patted earth down like placing a last blanket. She whispered for an hour until her voice was raw. When the hole was filled, she went back inside and sat in the dark. That night, the licking returned. Maggie felt a small, damp tongue on her hand. She flinched and then realized with a cold that felt like a bucket poured over her head that the tongue was not rough. It was soft and careful and not the same as Old Blue. She pulled up the covers and the tongue came again, slower. Then a voice flat and wrong said from the dark under her bed, "Don't be afraid, it's only me." She slept because fear is sometimes a thing that explains itself away. But in the small hours she woke to a sound of wet fingers slapping the mattress near her feet. She felt something smooth and human press itself against her ankle, and it moved with a cadence like a lover trying on a shoe. She screamed and flung the covers back. Under the bed was empty. The window was latched. On the floor was a single dark smear and, by the side of her bed, a small patch of fur that was not Old Blue's. It was clamped in the carpet fibers, like something that had been kissed and then left. Maggie moved that night to a motel. She stayed 2 weeks in a place whose carpets wore a proud city smell. She called a friend to come take her to the county fair. She told people what had happened and the stories stretched like taffy. A prowler, a predator, a creature that mimicked. Some said it was a person, a sick one. Some said it was something else. On the last night, after bracing herself and pretending sleep, Maggie woke to silence. Then gently, like a hand testing a cheek, a small wet tongue licked her hand. She opened her eyes. It was not under her bed. It was on the pillow beside her. A shape lay there that fit no animal she'd known. It had a head like a child and long fingers. And when it turned its face toward her, the eyes were very young and very ancient. It smiled, and for a second it looked like Old Blue. Then its mouth tightened and the smile slid away. It whispered, "I kept my promise. I'll keep you company." Maggie did not stay another night. She went home once to pack, and the house felt like someone else's skin. When she pulled the sheets off that bed, she found a small wet patch on the pillow with a pattern of tiny, neat teeth marks in it. In the corner of the bedroom, pressed into the wall, was a mark like the impression of a paw. It was not a paw. You tell this story and people laugh because they know the original as a joke. The dog licks your hand and it's the killer. But the joke is thin. Something lighter than a person and heavier than a shadow liked to be mistaken for a dog. It learned names and sounds, and sometimes it used them kindly to get inside. If you ever hear a small lick in the dark and your dog is not the one, don't reach under the bed. Pet it with your mind and go for the light. Locks are polite, but not all promises are kept by locks. The smiling man had happened late one night when Mark was walking home from work. He liked walking after midnight. The streets were empty, the lights were soft, and the air was cool. It made him feel calm. But that night something strange happened. Mark was about 3 blocks from his apartment when he saw a man standing under a streetlight. The man was wearing a dark suit that looked too big for him. His back was turned. He stood very still, facing a clothes store. At first, Mark didn't think much of it. Maybe the man was drunk or waiting for someone. But then the man started moving. He began to dance, slowly, side to side, with his arms hanging loose. His head rolled from shoulder to shoulder like he was listening to music that wasn't there. Mark stopped walking. He watched, unsure what to do. Then the man turned around. He turned too quickly, like a mannequin being spun. His face came into the light, and Mark saw something that made his stomach twist. The man was smiling. It wasn't a normal smile. It was wide, too wide, stretching across his face. His eyes were open so far that they looked wrong. He didn't blink. He didn't move. He just stood there staring, smiling that awful smile. Mark's voice shook. "You okay, man?" The man didn't answer. He just kept smiling. Mark stepped back. "All right, take care." He walked away, trying to act normal. But he felt that smile burning into his back. When he looked again, the man was still there under the light, still smiling. Mark kept walking faster now. After a few minutes, he told himself it was fine. Just a weird person. Maybe drunk. Then he heard it. Footsteps, soft. Slow footsteps behind him. He turned around. The man was there again, walking toward him. His walk wasn't right. His legs bent too much, his steps were uneven, and his body moved like a puppet on strings. His head tilted from side to side, and still that smile. Mark felt cold all over. He crossed the street and tried to stay calm. The footsteps followed. Step, 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 then silence. He turned again. The street was empty. The smiling man was gone. Mark let out a shaky laugh. "Okay," he whispered. "You're just tired." He turned the next corner. The smiling man was there, standing under another light, smiling the same smile. Mark's breath caught. He stumbled backward. "Stay away from me," he shouted. The smiling man didn't speak. He began to dance again, that same slow, strange sway, side to side, as if he were laughing without sound. Mark ran. He ran all the way to his apartment. He fumbled with his keys, hands shaking, and slammed the door shut behind him. Inside, he leaned against the door, gasping. He listened for footsteps outside, but heard nothing. For a long time, he didn't move. Finally, he locked the door, turned off the lights, and sat on his couch. He didn't sleep that night. Every sound made him jump. The hum of the fridge, the wind outside, the pipes in the wall. Once he thought he heard laughter from the street, but when he looked out the window, no one was there. The next night, he told himself he had imagined it. It couldn't have been real. But when the clock hit 2 a.m., Mark looked out his window. There, across the street, under the same light, stood the smiling man. Same suit, same grin, same stillness. He wasn't moving. He was facing Mark's apartment. Mark's mouth went dry. He turned off his lamp and watched from behind the curtain. After a long, still moment, the smiling man started to sway again, side to side. Side to side. The shadow behind him moved like it was alive. Then suddenly he stopped. Slowly, the smiling man raised one arm. He began to wave, a slow, strange wave, like he knew exactly where Mark was. Mark dropped the curtain and backed away from the window. His heart was pounding in his ears. He didn't call the police. What would he say? There's a man outside smiling too much. After a few minutes, he looked again. The street was empty. He tried to laugh at himself. Maybe it really was nothing. Maybe he was tired. But then, in the glass reflection of the window, he saw something behind him, a tall, thin shape standing in his hallway. He spun around. The hallway was empty. No one there. Just shadows. Mark didn't sleep that night either. 3 days went by. He stayed home, didn't go to work, kept his curtain shut. He barely ate. He told himself he'd been hallucinating, that it wasn't real. On the 4th night, he decided to take another walk. Just one short walk to prove to himself the street was safe. It was quiet outside. The air was cool. The lights buzzed gently. Everything seemed normal. He even smiled a little. "See," he said. "You're fine." Then a voice spoke from behind him, low, soft, almost a whisper. "You shouldn't walk alone." Mark froze. The voice was right next to his ear. He turned around. The smiling man was right there. Up close, the grin was worse. His lips were cracked and stretched, his teeth small and yellow, his eyes shining too bright. Mark stepped back, shaking. "Go away." The smiling man tilted his head like he was confused. Then he leaned closer until his face was inches from Mark's. He whispered, "You looked lonely." Mark ran. He ran down the street, turned corners, didn't look where he was going. His breath came in painful gasps. When he finally stopped and looked back, the street was empty. The smiling man was gone. People tell stories about him online now. They call him the Smiling Man. Some say he's a ghost. Some say he's not human at all. They say if you see him, don't smile back. If you do, he'll follow you home. Others say if you ignore him, he'll still walk behind you, dancing, waiting for you to turn around. Mark doesn't walk at night anymore. He moved to another city, another job. But sometimes when he looks out his new window late at night, he swears he sees a tall figure under a streetlight, swaying side to side. And if you ever walk home alone after midnight and you hear soft footsteps behind you, don't turn around, because if you see him dancing, he's already smiling at you. Story 5. The hiker's friend Tom and his girlfriend Amy went camping in a national forest in Oregon. They loved camping and went several times a year. This trip was supposed to be special. Tom was planning to propose to Amy on the last night. They set up their tent near a beautiful stream. The area was peaceful and quiet. They spent the first day hiking and enjoying nature. That night, as they cooked dinner over their campfire, they heard something moving in the woods nearby. "Probably just a raccoon," Tom said, but he shined his flashlight into the trees, just to be sure. The light caught nothing but branches and leaves. They went to bed around 10. The night was clear and cool. Amy fell asleep quickly, but Tom stayed awake for a while, listening to the sounds of the forest. Owls hooting, small animals rustling in the underbrush, normal sounds. He eventually drifted off to sleep. Something woke Tom up in the middle of the night. He did not know what at first. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Someone was walking around their campsite. Heavy footsteps like boots on dirt. Tom's heart started pounding. They were miles from any other campers. Tom carefully reached for his flashlight without moving too much. He did not want to alert whoever was out there. He could hear Amy's breathing next to him. She was still asleep. The footsteps continued circling the tent. Around and around, slow and deliberate. Then the footsteps stopped, right outside the tent door. Tom held his breath. He could hear Amy starting to wake up next to him. She sensed something was wrong. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then a voice spoke. A man's voice, rough and strange. "I know you're in there," the voice said. "I can hear you breathing." Amy grabbed Tom's arm. Her fingernails dug into his skin. They both stayed completely still. "I just want to talk," the voice continued. "I'm lonely out here. I've been alone for so long. Please come out and talk to me." Tom whispered as quietly as he could. "Don't move. Don't make a sound." The voice outside laughed. It was a horrible laugh, like gravel scraping on metal. "I can hear you whispering. I have very good hearing, better than you might think. Please leave us alone," Amy said, her voice shaking. "We don't want any trouble." "No trouble," the voice said. "I just want friends. I want to see your faces. I want to talk to you. I want to know your names. Will you tell me your names?" Something about the way the voice asked for their names made Tom feel sick. This was not a normal hiker or camper. Something was very wrong about this person. "Go away," Tom said, trying to sound brave. "We're calling the park rangers," the voice laughed again. "No, you're not. There's no cell signal out here. You're all alone with me. Just the three of us. Unless you count the others." "What others?" Amy whispered. "The friends I've made," the voice said. "They're here too. They want to meet you. They don't talk much anymore, but they're good listeners. They'll listen to you scream." Tom grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight function. He shined it at the tent wall where the voice was coming from. The light revealed a shadow, the outline of a person standing right outside the thin tent fabric. The shadow was wrong. The head was too big. The arms were too long. The proportions were all off. "That's not very nice," the voice said. shining lights in people's faces. I don't like it. Then the shadow moved. It bent down and Tom could see the outline of hands reaching for the tent zipper. Long fingers, too many fingers, started pulling the zipper down. Tom and Amy screamed. They scrambled to the back of the tent. Tom grabbed his pocket knife and opened it. The zipper came down inch by inch. They could see darkness outside. Then the zipper stopped. Everything went silent. No voice, no footsteps, nothing. Tom and Amy waited in the tent until sunrise, holding on to each other, Tom's knife in his shaking hand. When the sun finally came up, they packed up their tent as fast as they could and hiked back to their car. They never looked back. When they got home, Tom checked their tent. There were scratch marks around the door zipper, not from human fingernails. The marks were deep, like they had been made by something sharp, something like claws, and there was a smell on the tent fabric, a horrible smell like rotting meat and wet dirt. They threw the tent away. They never went camping in that forest again, and Tom never did propose to Amy. How could he after that night? How could he take her back to a place where something with too many fingers and a voice like gravel had wanted to know their names? Sometimes Amy has nightmares. She dreams that they gave that thing their names, that they opened the tent door and looked at its face. In her dreams, she sees what was standing outside. She sees the others it mentioned, the friends it had made. She sees why they don't talk anymore. She wakes up screaming, and Tom holds her, and neither of them talk about what might have happened if the sun had not come up when it did. Story 6. The Park Ranger's Warning. This story comes from a woman named Ellen. She used to be a park ranger in a national park in Montana. She worked there for 15 years, but she does not work there anymore. She quit her job and moved far away. When people ask her which park she worked at, she refuses to tell them. She says some places should not have their names spoken out loud. Ellen loved being a park ranger at first. She loved helping visitors enjoy nature safely. She loved hiking the trails and seeing beautiful views. She loved protecting the wilderness and the animals. It was her dream job. But there was one part of the park that bothered Ellen. The other rangers had a special name for it. They called it the Dead Zone. This name never appeared on any park maps or signs. It was just what the rangers called it among themselves. The Dead Zone was a section of forest about 5 miles from the main campground. On maps, it looked normal, just trees and hills like the rest of the park. But something was very wrong with that area. Animals would not go into the Dead Zone. Deer would walk up to the edge of it and then turn around. Bears avoided it completely. Even birds would not fly over it. They would fly around it instead. And bugs. There were no bugs in the Dead Zone at all. No mosquitoes, no flies, no ants, nothing. Just empty, silent forest. The temperature was wrong too. Even on hot summer days when the rest of the park was warm and sunny, the Dead Zone was cold. Rangers who went in there said their breath made white clouds even when it was 80 degrees outside. Park rangers had rules about the Dead Zone. Never go in there alone. Always go with at least one other ranger, and never ever go in after dark. These were strict rules. Ellen followed them carefully for her first 5 years working at the park. She heard older rangers tell stories about strange things they had seen or heard in the Dead Zone, but Ellen never experienced anything strange herself. She started to think the stories were just legends to scare new rangers. Then one summer, 3 college students went missing. They were young hikers, 2 men and 1 woman, all about 20 years old. They had gone hiking together on a Saturday morning. By Saturday night, they had not returned. By Sunday, their families called the park to report them missing. The park organized search parties. Ellen volunteered to help search. For 2 weeks, dozens of rangers and volunteers searched the park. They looked everywhere. They called the hikers names. They used search dogs. They checked every trail, every campsite, every area where hikers might go. They found nothing. No bodies, no backpacks, no clothing, no food wrappers, no signs that the 3 students had ever been in that part of the forest. It was like they had vanished into thin air. But then one of the search dogs found something important. The dog was searching near the dead zone. It followed a scent right up to the edge of the dead zone and then stopped. The dog sat down and started whining. It refused to go any further into the dead zone no matter how much its handler tried to make it go. The handler looked around carefully. He saw something hanging from a tree branch right at the edge of the dead zone. It was a backpack. When he checked the name tag on the backpack, he saw it belonged to one of the missing students. Ellen volunteered to go into the dead zone to search for more clues. Another ranger named Mike went with her. They were both experienced rangers who knew the forest well. They thought they could handle whatever they found. Ellen and Mike entered the dead zone at 10 in the morning. The temperature dropped immediately. It felt like walking into a refrigerator. They could see their breath even though it was July and the sun was shining. They followed a trail of broken branches and disturbed leaves deeper into the dead zone. As they walked, Ellen noticed the silence. Complete total silence. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering, no insects buzzing, no wind in the trees. The only sounds were Ellen and Mike's footsteps and their voices when they called out for the missing students. They walked for 2 hours, going deeper and deeper into the dead zone. They called the students' names over and over. No one answered. Ellen was starting to think they should turn back when Mike suddenly stopped walking. "Do you hear that?" Mike asked Ellen. Ellen stopped and listened carefully. At first she heard nothing but silence. Then she heard it too. Music, someone was singing. It was very faint, coming from somewhere deeper in the dead zone. The voice sounded like a woman singing a song. The melody was beautiful but somehow wrong. The notes seemed to fit together in ways that should not be possible. "We should go check it out," Mike said. His eyes looked strange, kind of blank and distant. He started walking toward the singing. Ellen grabbed his arm. "No," she said. "We need to leave. Right now." Something about the singing made Ellen feel sick. Her instincts were screaming at her that something was very wrong. This was not a normal person singing. This was not one of the missing students. This was something else. Mike pulled his arm away from Ellen. "The students might be there. We have to check." He walked faster toward the singing. His voice sounded flat and emotionless. Ellen followed Mike because she could not let him go alone. But every step felt wrong. Every cell in her body was telling her to run away. The singing got louder as they walked. Ellen realized it did not sound like one woman singing. It sounded like several women singing the exact same words at the exact same time. Their voices overlapped in strange ways. They came to a clearing in the forest. In the middle of the clearing was a dark opening in a hillside. A cave. The singing was coming from inside the cave. The sound echoed out from the darkness. Mike walked straight up to the cave entrance. He did not seem afraid at all. He seemed almost hypnotized by the singing. "Hello?" Mike called into the cave. "Is anyone in there? We are park rangers. We are here to help you." The singing stopped immediately. The silence that followed was worse than the singing. Ellen could hear her own heart beating in her ears. She could hear Mike breathing. But nothing from the cave. Then something answered from inside the darkness. A voice spoke. It sounded like a woman's voice. But something was wrong with it. The words were strange and slurred, like the person speaking had too many teeth in their mouth, or like someone was trying to copy a human voice but did not quite know how. "Come inside," the voice said. "Please come inside. We have been waiting for you. We have been singing for you. Come inside and join us. We are so happy you are here." Mike took a step toward the cave entrance. Ellen grabbed him hard and pulled him back. "We are leaving," Ellen said firmly. "Right now." "But the students," Mike started to say. His voice still sounded flat and strange. "They are not in there," Ellen said. She pulled Mike away from the cave. "Whatever is in there, it is not the students. We need to go. Now." As Ellen pulled Mike backward, she saw movement in the darkness of the cave. Shapes were moving inside. She could not see them clearly because it was too dark. But there were several shapes, multiple things moving in the cave, and they were not shaped like people. The shapes were too tall. too thin. They moved in wrong ways, like their bodies could bend in places where human bodies do not bend. They moved forward toward the cave entrance, coming toward the light. One of the shapes reached the opening of the cave. Ellen got a clear look at it for just a second before she turned and started running. The thing was very tall, maybe 8 feet. Its skin looked like tree bark, rough and gray. Its body was thin and twisted. Its arms were too long and had too many joints. But the worst part was its face. The face looked almost human but stretched out. It had eyes. Too many eyes. Maybe 6 or 7 eyes scattered across its face in random places. It had a mouth that was too wide, stretching from one side of its face to the other. The mouth was full of teeth that went deep back into its throat. And it was smiling. A huge, terrible smile. Ellen ran. Mike ran too. The singing started again behind them, but now it sounded angry. The voices were louder and harsher. Ellen did not look back. She just ran as fast as she could through the dead zone forest. They ran for 30 minutes straight, not stopping even when their lungs burned and their legs ached. They ran until they were out of the dead zone. Only when they reached normal forest with bird sounds and warm sunshine did they finally stop to catch their breath. When Ellen and Mike got back to the ranger station, they reported what they saw. They told their supervisor everything. The cave, the singing, the shapes that were not human. The thing with too many eyes. Their supervisor listened to the whole story. His face was calm and blank. When they finished, he took their written report and locked it in a file cabinet in his office. You did not see anything, the supervisor said. You searched the dead zone and found no sign of the missing hikers. That is all that happened. Do you understand me? Ellen understood. The Park Service knew about the things in the dead zone. They had known for a long time, maybe years, maybe decades, and they were not going to do anything about it. They were just going to keep it secret. Ellen quit her job 2 months later. She could not keep working at a park where she knew there was something dangerous and the Park Service was hiding it. She could not keep smiling at visitors and telling them to have a nice hike when she knew what was waiting in the dead zone. Ellen has nightmares about that cave. She dreams about the shapes moving in the darkness. She dreams about that face with too many eyes and too many teeth smiling at her. She wakes up in the middle of the night with her heart racing. And sometimes, even now that she lives far away from that park, she hears the singing, late at night when everything is quiet. Multiple voices singing in perfect, impossible harmony, singing a song with no words, singing a song that calls people to come into the dark and join them. The 3 missing college students were never found. Their case is still open. The Park Service says they probably just got lost and died of exposure, even though search teams found no trace of them. Ellen knows better. She knows what happened to them. She knows they went into that cave. She knows they answered when the singing called to them. And she knows they are still there, down in the darkness, changed into something that is not human anymore, singing along with the other things that live in that cave, waiting for more visitors to come and join them. Ellen wants people to know, when you go hiking in the wilderness, stay on the marked trails. Do not go into areas that feel wrong. If you hear singing in the forest and you cannot see who is singing, do not follow it. If you find a cave and hear voices calling you to come inside, run away as fast as you can, because some places in the wilderness are not empty. They are occupied, and the things that live there are always hungry for new members to join their family. Story 7. The Last Text. This is a modern scary story that happened to 4 friends in 2021. It happened in Pennsylvania. The scary part is that it involves something we all carry every day, our phones. Jessica, Rachel, Ben, and Tyler were best friends. They had known each other since high school. They were all around 25 years old and worked busy jobs in the city. They decided they needed a break from work and stress and constant phone notifications. They planned a camping trip for a long weekend. They picked a camping spot deep in the woods of Pennsylvania. The spot was far from any towns or cities, miles and miles from civilization. They wanted to really get away from everything and just enjoy nature. No work emails, no social media, no phone calls, just peace and quiet and good friends. They arrived at the campsite on Friday evening just before sunset. The place was beautiful. Tall trees surrounded them on all sides. A small creek flowed nearby, making peaceful bubbling sounds. The air smelled like pine and earth. It was perfect. They set up their tents in a circle around where they would build their campfire. Each person had their own small tent. They gathered wood and built a fire. They cooked hot dogs and marshmallows. They told jokes and laughed. It felt good to be away from the city. As the sun set completely and darkness fell, they all took out their phones. They had agreed to check their messages one last time, tell their families they had arrived safely, and then put the phones away for the whole weekend. A technology-free camping trip. Tyler looked at his phone and laughed. "Well, this is weird," he said. "I have full signal out here. 5 bars. I have better service in the middle of the woods than I do at my apartment." The others checked their phones. Jessica had full bars. Rachel had full bars. Ben had full bars. All of them had perfect cell phone service even though they were miles from the nearest town. "Maybe there is a cell tower nearby," Rachel suggested. They all shrugged. It was strange, but they were not going to complain about it. They quickly sent texts to their families saying they had arrived safely and would not have their phones on for the weekend. Then they put their phones away in their tent bags. They had made a promise to each other, no phones this weekend. They were going to stick to that promise. Saturday was wonderful. They woke up early and went hiking. They swam in the cold creek. They collected interesting rocks and took pictures with an old disposable camera Rachel had brought. They cooked meals over the fire and told stories. By Saturday night, they were all tired and happy. The camping trip was exactly what they needed. They went to bed around midnight. Everyone was exhausted from the long day of hiking and swimming. Within minutes of getting into their sleeping bags, they were all asleep. Jessica woke up sometime in the middle of the night. She needed to use the bathroom. She quietly unzipped her tent and stepped outside. The campsite was dark except for the moonlight filtering through the trees. The fire had burned down to just glowing embers. As Jessica walked toward the edge of camp to go to the bathroom, she noticed something. Her tent bag was glowing slightly, just a faint light coming from inside the bag. She walked over and unzipped it. Her phone screen was lit up. She had a text message notification. This was strange. Everyone had agreed to keep their phones off. Jessica picked up her phone and looked at the message. It was from Ben. The message said, "Did you hear that noise? I think something is outside the tent." Jessica felt confused. She looked over at Ben's tent. It was dark and quiet. The zipper was closed. Ben was probably asleep in there. Maybe he had sent the message earlier and it just now came through because of weak signal. But when Jessica looked at the timestamp, on the message it said the message had been sent 2 minutes ago at 3:17 a.m. Right now was 3:19 a.m. Jessica walked quietly over to Ben's tent. She whispered, "Ben, are you awake? Did you just text me?" No answer from the tent. Jessica waited a few seconds and whispered again, "Ben?" Still no answer. Just silence. Jessica carefully unzipped Ben's tent a little bit and peeked inside. Ben was sound asleep in his sleeping bag. She could hear him snoring softly. His phone was in his bag next to his sleeping bag. The phone screen was dark. It was turned off. Jessica felt a chill run down her back. If Ben was asleep and his phone was off, who sent her that text message? She backed away from Ben's tent and looked around the campsite. Everything looked normal. Just dark tents and trees and shadows. Jessica was about to go wake everyone up when her phone buzzed in her hand. Another text message had arrived. This one was from Rachel. It said, "Why is Tyler just standing in the woods staring at our tents?" Jessica's heart started beating faster. She looked over at Rachel's tent, dark and quiet with the zipper closed. Then she looked at Tyler's tent, also dark and quiet. Then she slowly turned around and looked at the woods behind her. There was someone standing at the edge of the trees, a dark figure standing perfectly still about 30 feet away. The moonlight was not bright enough to see details, just a human-shaped shadow standing there, not moving, just standing and staring toward the tents. Jessica's phone buzzed again. She looked down at it with shaking hands. Another text from Tyler. This one said, "I can see myself standing by the woods. How is that possible? I am in my tent right now." Then another text from Ben. "Everyone needs to stay in their tents. Something is very wrong." Then from Rachel, "It is getting closer to us." Jessica looked up from her phone. The figure had moved. It was closer now, maybe 20 feet away. Close enough that Jessica could see it was shaped like a person. But the shape was wrong. Too Tall 7 True Campfire Horror Stories.